Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. The Supreme Court has directed the Election Commission to accept Aadhaar as the 12th prescribed document for establishing the identity of voters in the special intensive revision of electoral rolls in poll-bound Bihar. At present, the special intensive revision exercise in Bihar allows voters to submit 11 types of identity documents along with their enumeration forms. A two-judge bench comprising Justices Surya, Kant and Joymalya Bagchi directed that while the Aadhaar card shall be treated as the 12th document by the Election Commission of India, it is open for the authorities to examine the validity and genuineness of the Aadhaar card itself. It is clarified that Aadhaar will not be treated as a proof of citizenship. SIR has become a major political flashpoint ahead of the upcoming Bihar Assembly elections. Now, this development comes just as the Election Commission is preparing to host its Conference of Chief Electoral Officers on the 10th of September to review the countrywide rollout of the Special Intensive Revision, an exercise that lies at the very core of India's democratic process. The objective is clear: to clean up and update electoral rolls, eliminate errors, and ensure that every eligible voter has a fair chance to participate. So, on the program today, we discuss why a nationwide SIR is critical to strengthening the foundation of our democracy, how technology and digital verification can help build more credible voter rolls, and what further electoral reforms are needed to enhance transparency, inclusivity, and fairness in the Indian elections. Joining us for a conversation are two distinguished guests. I am pleased to welcome on the program today Mr. Akshay Rawat, former Director General, Election Commission of India. Mr. Rawat, thank you for joining us on the program. Welcome to Sansad TV. I'm also pleased to welcome Professor Himanshu Prasad Roy, Center for Political Studies, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Roy, thank you for your time as well. Mr. Rawat, allow me to begin the conversation today with you. First, with your thoughts and views on the importance, the significance of an exercise like SIR in ensuring the credibility and the legitimacy of elections in the country.
Let me put it this way. A pure, healthy and updated electoral roll is the foundation of the electoral process, which in turn is the foundation of democracy, right? Whether SIR is required for that or not, that's something which falls within the mandate of Election Commission of India. Right. That's what even Supreme Court has categorically said, because that's a procedure. The constitutional mandate under Article 324 for the Election Commission of India, just remember one thing: before the conduct of elections comes the maintenance and superintendence of the electoral roll. And to have an electoral roll which is correct, accurate to the extent possible, and updated is the responsibility of ECI. For that, like in 2003, 2004, they had chosen to have a intensive revision. They have now again chosen to have an intensive revision. This is based on their understanding of the state of electoral roll. It goes without saying that every year there is a summary revision, and before the elections also there is a special revision. Okay. But these are all in place. These are all good. But they have perhaps not been able to cleanse the electoral roll to the extent the special intensive revision can. That's the assessment of ECI, and we must respect that. Let me tell you, for any disease that you or I or anyone has, there is an antibiotic which is given to get rid of the sickness. But there is also a surgery required sometimes for getting rid of the whole disease or sickness or infection. So it is just a matter of application of what you want to apply to bring a pathological situation to a decent and accurate situation. That's what Election Commission is doing. And that's what the competence and the correctness of this action of SIR has been not only claimed by ECI, but also has been reaffirmed by Supreme Court of India. So that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Rawat, when you say that, before I go across to Mr. Roy, I'll take one comment on the latest development, which is the Supreme Court now directing the Election Commission to include Aadhaar as the 12th document. do you think it's going to strengthen the procedure and the process of verification, or do you see further challenges for the Election Commission in ensuring genuineness and also addressing concerns of misuse?
Yeah, let me put it this way. Article 326, which talks about the eligibility of an elector, talks about citizenship, talks about 18 years of age, and talks about people who should not be otherwise disqualified, and they should be normally the resident of the area. That is the constituency.
Right.
Okay. Now, the SIR, as Commission has said, and as we all understand, that is basically to assert that conditions of Article 326 are fulfilled in case of each elector. That is why perhaps in the documents which ECI had, Aadhaar card was not included, because it's not an established proof of citizenship, right, as prescribed under Article 326, because the voter or the elector has to be a citizen of India to start with. It's simple. But at the same time, there was also an anxiety that Aadhaar cards could be forged and could be duplicated, as there is a fear existing among election managers. So, in the earlier hearings, Supreme Court very rightly had indicated to Election Commission of India to examine if they can use it as an one of the options as documents. But now it has come conclusively to say, please accept it. This has something in which ECI and Supreme Court has been thinking together. How? I'll just give me 1 minute.
Please go ahead.
The way SIR was anticipated, SIR was imagined at the beginning, there has been a lot of flexibility and lot of facilitation of voter which have now come all the way in the last 2.5 months. Since SIR was announced in June 24, there is a lot of additional flexibility and facilitation which ECI has introduced and some Supreme Court has directed. This is one, I take it as a facilitation measure. It's not something as against the ECI, but something to facilitate people more, because the time frame is less, and Aadhaar card is something which has become universal, which is available. But mind you, ECI, the Supreme Court has also said, make sure the ECI has been authorized to check if an Aadhaar card is genuine or not. Yeah.
So how that proceeds is something that we will see in due course of time. But Professor, coming in for your perspective, it's absolutely important to have an accurate, inclusive voter list, especially when we are having a discussion, or especially when we are targeting, say, credible electoral procedure in the country. But what we've seen in the case of Bihar, and it may pose a problem when we move towards a nationwide SIR, is how migration perhaps leads to duplication. In this case, we've seen marginalized groups, first-time voters, they're facing problems in registration. How can we ensure that this duplicity does not happen and this procedure is accepted in the true spirit in which it is being conducted, to ensure that there are no duplicate voters, there are the people who do not possess more than one voter I card, and so that our democratic exercise is something that we will be extremely proud of in the times to come, which will have no discrepancies of any sort.
Tina, thank you very much for this question and this invitation on the Sansad TV. Most importantly, first, I agree with what Raut Sahab had said. 100% I agree with that. More importantly, the whole idea of Prime Minister Modi, that one nation, one election, and constant revision of electoral rolls, that must be an integral part of the electoral process. Mm-hmm. As far as I understand, roughly in between, there is no fixed data, but as far as I understand, Raut Sahib may vouch for that, 26 to 35 crores of migrant laborers are not able to vote simply because they have become migrant. They have left their own constituency and they are not able to vote. This is one fact that we must keep it in mind. The second fact is many of the outsiders, particularly Bangladeshis, and we know that there is a government reports that in the 17 districts of Bengal, many parts of Assam, Tripura, and other parts of northeastern, then in Bihar, in 7, 8 districts of Bihar over the decades that they have acquired in many of the constituencies majorities. This is a fact of life.
Right.
And these people, we all know, we all citizens know that these are facts of life. It's only a question of numbers. But then in electoral democracy, in many of the constituencies, these outside migrants determine the results, particularly when till pre 2014, when the life was comfortable, when they were voted back into power, the contemporary opposition, there was not much of a hue and cry. But now, when they are losing the elections, particularly in those areas where they are losing the elections, they make a hue and cry. So this opposition to SIR, this is purely a political gimmick, nothing more than that. And of course, the constant revision of the electoral rolls, the Aadhaar in particular, and other election cards and all kinds of government documents needs to be constantly upgraded and verified, because we know very well through our personal experiences that how these cards have been. It's only a question of verification of numbers. We don't have the accurate number how many, but through lot of fraudulent means, bribery and corruption, and there is a tacit kind of, through corrupt means, there is a tacit kind of the staff who does it, and then those who are from outside, they get all these government documents to prove they are being bona fide citizens of India, which they are not. Therefore, this needs constant revision and verification.
So
including Aadhaar election cards, yes.
Certainly, you've raised important points. Let me get Mr. Raut's perspective on this, and especially on the aspect that reformative measures we often see, especially in context of electoral reforms, they often become political flashpoints, Mr. Rawat. But as you rightly said in your first answer, that there are times when a surgery is required to fix a problem. Do you think, given the situation, given the objective that the SIR or other electoral reforms that are proposed by the ECI from time to time, do you think the manner in which controversies erupt, the manner in which narratives are set across the country, that there is perhaps some kind of confusion also put in the minds of voters? In context of all of these, the ECI should be given more teeth to ensure compliance by not just the states, but also by the political parties who are all part of that exercise, who are ultimately benefiting from the exercise.
Yeah. I think ECI doesn't require any more teeth. It has sufficient teeth. And by issuing the SIR orders and going by it, it has shown that it has the teeth. So, because you see, if the election system, the central role, the central part is the voter, then it is the political parties, then it is the Election Commission of India, which is the manager. Supreme Court of India made an interesting observation just in the last hearing before today. It talked about a trust deficit. If you do not, because this all linkage is through trust. Election Commission of India is a constitutional organization. It has been given certain mandate. In fact, compared to the earlier times, now the election commissioners are selected by a collegium through the last amendment. So if you do not trust that, and not only that, you must have seen that together with criticism of SIR, some elections which were held long back and in which governments are in place, those results and outcomes and those electoral rolls are being questioned.
Right.
This is just like throwing the baby with the bathwater. You cannot abandon your own constitutional organization. You can stay engaged, and citizens must reflect and must also come back with feedback and complaints and grievances. And there is a huge, let me assure you, that under the constitution and existing statutes, there is grievance and complaint redressal measures. And I do not see any problem that political parties have issues relating to SIR. Some of those have been addressed by ECI itself, and some of those are being addressed by Supreme Court of India. But to say that, to contest electoral outcomes and to say that the whole election management is wrong, because Mind you, Election Commission is not only the three authorities who are sitting in Nirvachan Sadan. No, it has 750 district collectors who are called district electoral officers, and the electoral registration officers, assistant electoral registration officer, about 11 lakh booth level officers. And this constitutes the election machinery. And we cannot just throw them out of the window because we have some trust issues. I would definitely encourage the Election Commission of India to as much transparency as they can do, to as much answering of the grievances. Election Commission of India cannot say that, okay, I have answered this, how many times I'll answer. I mean, they are in that position in which they have to answer again and again.
Absolutely.
But trust is something which we must preserve about the constitution, constitutional machinery, our own judiciary, our systems. Otherwise, we would not be the largest democracy. We also want to be the most powerful democracy. Otherwise, it will be all gone.
So you've been writing extensively. Yes. Please complete your point.
What is an electoral role? The Professor Himanshu was talking in a very nice language of academics. Let me put it in electoral management language. Anyone who is eligible should be in the electoral roll, and anyone who is not eligible should not be in the electoral roll. That is the bottom line of it. Do you know what is giving me maximum happiness in this SIR process? 17 lakh in Bihar, 17 lakh new electors who have just become 18-year-old and plus. They have applied to Form 6 to get added to the electoral roll. No one is talking about this. This is actually the inclusion of all eligible electors and the youth that India expects and India deserves and everyone deserves. So I think, let me again put a word of caution. SIR is not a goal, it's a means. The goal is a pure, accurate electoral roll. The means, okay, as I told you, you yourself quoted the example of medicine and surgery. Sometimes you require this means, that means a summary revision, a pre-election revision, sometimes SIR. Only because it did not have too many precedents recently, or it is becoming a little too much of a large operation, we cannot say that, okay, it's wrong. We can question, okay, facilitation, flexibility, which is being done. That's how I look at it.
Sure. So you've spoken about inclusivity, you spoke about trust, but how can we rebuild that trust is something that I'll come to you and understand in the next round. Professor Roy, in addition to inclusivity, in addition to transparency, what the larger goal of the Election Commission of India is also to ensure huge voter turnout. So even if you get the electoral rolls accurate, your purpose is not served until the turnouts are also huge. So if I may add to all of these reforms, how do you ensure a huge voter turnout also? Do you think it's time to also revisit and sort of attract people to go out and vote? How can we do that? Do you have any solution in mind so that every person who has a valid voter ID card makes sure to go to the booth and exercise their democratic right, something that is not happening 100% in the country, unfortunately?
Right, Tina, and the right question. See, I have a electoral voting rights, electoral card, but I am not in my constituency. Should I travel 2,000 kilometers to Bengal or to Odisha or to Kerala to vote? Simply not possible, but many go. That's the good part. Therefore, in the very first instance, I said that if the electoral card becomes valid where I am located, not in my constituency, but I can vote even outside my constituency through digital platforms. If those digital platforms are, operationalized, see, I'm say from Delhi, but now my job is in Kerala. Because of the election timing and because of my own work nature, I won't come to Delhi to vote. Right. So if my electoral card becomes operational while sitting in Kerala and I'm able to vote in Delhi through that digital platform, that will be, it means 26 to 35 crores of India's population will be able to vote. That will bring in larger percentage of voters onto the universal sort of kind of franchise where the percentage of voters will increase from say 62, 65%, that may go up to 70%. Of course, there are wide regional variations. Many of the Northeast we find 80%, 75%, 80%, 85%. But many of the states and regions, we find 45%. For example, South Delhi, where I'm located right now in JNU, hardly votes for 45 to 50%.
Absolutely.
In the municipal election, hardly 38, 42%. So this kind of, there is a discrepancy. So this one means that the sixth committee, the latest committee that's known as Ramnath Kovind High Level Committee formed in 2023-24 examines and recommends one nation, one election. Because already there were 6 committees since 1974. Tarkunde Committee, Dinesh Goswami Committee, Vora Committee, Inderjit Gupta Committee, Law Commission reports, and yet we find in the last 40 years or more, 50 years, look at the kind of sluggish, the kind of electoral reforms and the lack of use of digital platforms or lack of fair means. And therefore, what Tarkunde Committee, just I'll share, Tarkunde Committee curbing money power and muscle power. Dinesh Goswami Committee 1990, state funding of elections.
Sure,
Vora
Dr. Roy,
Committee
we'll come to those aspects, money, power, corruption, and all of that. But you raised a genuine concern, which is the low voter turnout because you are registered at A place, but you're working at place B. Mr. Rawat, that's a concern that I think a lot of Indians face because migration, of course, is a huge factor. Are we working, or has the Election Commission, I'm sure the Election Commission must have thought about this problem. Can we have a voter ID system wherein it's attached to the place of work and not to the permanent residence? Because a lot of Indians are also skeptical on changing the address because you want it linked to the permanent place of your residence. So what is the other way that you don't have to change the address, but you're able to vote at the place or where you're residing, which is your temporary residence?
Yeah. You mentioned the issue of voter turnout, and Professor talked about the use of possible technology about it. 2 years back, there was a wonderful initiative by the Election Commission of India of remote voting. Trustable technology-based remote voting, exactly the situation which you and Professor both are highlighting. If someone is thousands of kilometers away or hundreds of kilometers away, it is not easy to expect him to come down spending all the money on the day of the election to place. But that remote voting went to a pilot level, went to a particular level. Election Commission had done all the preparation for it, but it fell short of political consensus. Because election is a delicate issue in which the consensus building has been so much missing, because there is also polarization in sort of approach to elections. The same thing about state funding, which we will discuss later on. So I wish initiatives like remote voting, other trustable technology voting should be taken forward to make sure that the 30% voters which we miss because of internal migration are captured. But the good point, let's not miss it, because I have been very passionately engaged on the theme of voter turnout, as you might know.
Yes.
In the last 3 national elections, the voting turnout in India has been consistently record 65%. It is 5-10% more than what it used to be the 70-year history. Okay, so there has been a flagship program called Systematic Voters Education and Electoral Participation, initiated from 2010, which has given wonderful result. And one of the attempts is also to use technology to facilitate voters, like remote voting, which I mentioned. And in Bihar, for example, now that the electoral roll is being attempted to remove dead and completely migrated people, duplicated voters, you will see, because the denominator will now go down. The percentage will certainly go up, because Bihar has certainly always been below 60% voter turnout. Let's hope that. But the motivation and information aspect, particularly the professor talked about the New Delhi syndrome, South Delhi syndrome, and South Mumbai syndrome, and urban apathy. Those require some people who are drawing room critics but fail to turn out and vote. And they have 1,000 reasons not to vote, while the poor and the villagers do vote. So we have urban apathy, we have some amount of youth non-participation. What Election Commission has greatly done in the last about 10 years is to bring women forward to voting. That has been successful because that was one of the handicaps. Now women turnout sometimes is more than men. The last fourth category who miss out are people in difficult conditions of life. Yes. Whether they're in remote islands, they're in top of the hills, in terrorist infected areas, but there has been an improvement. The urban apathy is one thing which I very much regret to say, that those who are in the higher educational and economic brackets, they don't turn out. They need to be told clearly that it is this way to be done.
Clearly, a lot of efforts have been made to increase that number, and especially when it comes to the rising percentage we've seen both in state and the national elections. But it needs to go up. We are the world's largest democracy, and our voter turnout at least has to be something which is very, very impressive. Professor, urban apathy happens to be one of the biggest factors. How are we addressing it? And especially if I may ask you in context of the role that universities can play, the role that civil society is playing or can further accelerate, especially in context of raising awareness and why everyone must vote. Or do you think in a country like ours, compulsory voting is something that we must be looking at, especially in context of the voter reforms, the electoral reforms?
Actually, Tina, already when Prime Minister Bagchi was the Prime Minister, there was a move by some of the civil society groups to make compulsory voting a constitutional measure. Because if I remember, I had done some homework, I was part of this. So 26 countries was enlisted where the compulsory voting was there. And if you are not able to go to vote, you have to justify or explain the reason why didn't you go to vote. But then in country like India, in those years when this movement by the civil society group was being enlisted, it didn't seem feasible at that point of time. So with 146 billion population may not be such a good practical idea. But as far as the university and schools are concerned, of course, in university like JNU and in university like Jadavpur University and in many state universities, the students are and the faculties are highly politicized, and they know the importance of the voting. That's one point. But if I put it into binary, a contradiction, in the slums, in the urban centers, and in the rural pockets of urban centers, they are much more politicized and aware, and they go in large for voting. So what Raut Sahab was saying, that urban empathy, it has no medicine. It only has surgery. And the surgery is compulsory voting. Otherwise, nothing is there. You see the contradictions.
We've seen a lot of changes happen over time, especially in the last decade or so. We hope this one will also have a solution. When it comes to electoral reforms, there's so much that we can talk about, and we hope to have a future conversation with the two of you on the other aspects that we couldn't touch on this edition of the program. But I'm glad we could still talk about the electoral rolls, the inclusivity that the Election Commission is aiming at. More than that, how to rebuild that trust in the institution, which is known for conducting free and fair elections, and more importantly, when the aim is to maintain that the elections in India remain to be the gold standard of democracy worldwide. So that's something hopefully we'll touch upon in future, but for now, time allows me to take up only that much on the program. Once again, thank you, Professor Roy, Mr. Rawat, for joining us on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.